Hello. Hello, welcome everyone. So I think we can get started. So we are only waiting for Neeraj to join as a speaker, but we can get started. So for everyone who just joined, welcome. This is the Web 3.0 Pioneers Twitter Space series. And for today's special topic is storage. So we're talking about storage for Web 3.0 futures. So today we have a really great speakers lineup. And so we'll start with our newest comer, Joao Fiadeiro, who is the product lead for client growth at Protocol Labs and especially for Filecoin. So Joao, please give us a short intro about yourself, please.
All right. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me? I think.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for hosting this Twitter space. My name is Joao, and yes, I am the product lead for client growth at Protocol Labs. Protocol Labs is building IPFS and Filecoin, two solutions for decentralized storage. And my goal is to ensure the adoption of Filecoin as a decentralized storage solution um, by providing better tools, better processes, and better insights to accelerate data onboarding to the protocol, enabling the ecosystem to build more on-ramps and discover new use cases for this exciting new technology.
Great. Thank you, Joao. And we'll get to the introduction about the particular products and areas you're working on. But first, let's go through the other speakers as well. So our next speaker, who has been on our panel before, is Dr. Zhou, who is actually the founder and CEO for ETHStorage as well as Quark Chain. So Chi, please give a short intro about yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to be here again. So I'm currently working on a scaling solution for Ethereum storage. It's based on Ethereum layer 2 and also data availability solutions, so that we are able to reduce the Ethereum mainnet security, but able to scale the storage capacity of Ethereum from a few terabytes to hundreds of terabytes or even petabytes. And everything is highly integrated with Ethereum ecosystem, including SDK, wallets, so that we are able to create very low onboarding costs for all the users and developers to use our large-scale storage solution. And we also developed a Web3 access protocol. That's a decentralized access protocol for smart contract, the web contents hosted by smart contracts and further using our large storage solutions. So now we have integrated with multiple blockchains. For example, yesterday we have integrated with Atlas and also integrated with Upcharm, Optimism, and there will be more blockchains that will be natively integrated with our Web3 access protocol in the coming days. So very happy to be here and to discuss the future of storage.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chief, for the introduction. So I think Neeraj might have slight problem. So let me try to invite him again and see if we can. Yeah. So I think he might be able to not able to accept as the speaker. So we'll work on that one. So let me give a quick kind of intro to Neeraj as well. So Neeraj actually has been a speaker on this panel a few years back. So he's the co-founder and CTO of Bluzelle Network, a multinational blockchain company based in Canada and Singapore. So they also kind of focus on the storage and the database as well. So they have some new directions. So as soon as we sorted out how he can join the speaker, so he will get his intro as well. So let's get started. So I think one of the main questions that I think our community has been asking is, so for the Web 3.0 storage, the assumption is we are solving some problems or issues or challenges in the Web 2.0 storage space. So I think it's a good opportunity maybe for the speakers to speak about what you are working on, what kind of problem you try to solve in the Web 2.0, and expand a bit about the products and solutions that address those challenges and problems. So I think we can start with Zhou, please.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I think that the way to best frame this is what is the value proposition of the products they are trying to build, and how do they solve problems that current solutions might create in Web 2. And by Web 2, I'm really talking about storage providers, cloud storage providers like Amazon through AWS or Google Cloud Compute or Microsoft Azure. So broadly speaking, when we're talking about some of the value propositions that our users enjoy, I would say really you can fall into one of two main camps. There are some people who are very mission aligned in terms of seeking a decentralized option, right? They don't want to be beholden to a provider that can, on a whim, decide to change costs, charge very large costs for egress, or any other sort of concern that might be created through the centralization of all this data. And so they might be wanting to make use of the fact that the Filecoin network offers over 4,000 storage providers scattered across the globe with whom they can transact directly and pick and choose based on their preferences and criteria exactly whom they want to basically store their data with. A second big aspect of it is that by having this sort of hyper competitive market, you are actually driving costs way, way down, right? So today, on average, we're seeing much, much lower costs compared to Web 2 solutions. The cost of storage has proven to be beyond 95% lower on a per gigabyte basis than today's market rate for Web 2 based public cloud storage providers for cold storage, right? So of course, we're starting to see clients who are cost constrained seeking alternatives. So when you're looking at, for example, the folks who are research institutions who may have tight budgets, they very much care about the fact that storage providers on the Filecoin ecosystem are able to provide much lower rates. Now, of course, like the fundamental benefit here by leveraging blockchains and by leveraging content-based addressing, which IPFS does, is the fact that you have verifiability, right? So Filecoin provides proofs, proof of storage, essentially, indicating or actually really proving to the data owner that their data has not been tampered with. If a single byte changes, we will know that. And storage providers who put on some collateral to guarantee the integrity of that data from a sort of economic standpoint will also be penalized. So there are extremely strong economic and technical incentives or mechanisms to guarantee the integrity of the data. And this is particularly important for users who care about the chain of custody of the data to really ensure that nothing was tampered with. Think about a journalist who cares about ensuring that none of their images might have been altered by a nation state. Consider, for example, a company who is storing lots of security camera footage, right? They really need to make sure that if and when some of that data is retrieved for some court case, that we have a provable mechanism to ensure that the data was not actually changed or tampered with. So all this in a trustless environment creates a lot of different interesting incentives from very different angles and users to care about Filecoin and explore the value proposition that we're able to offer.
Okay, I think, Zhao, I think that's a really good summary because I heard that you talk about cost and talk about integrity. So both, I think, also apply to lots of other Web 3.0 kind of infrastructure as well. So, so for now, I think we'll switch to Neeraj because Neeraj I now joined as speaker. So Neeraj, you have been on the panel before, so we are really curious. In the last few years, have Bluzelle? What have Bluzelle been developing? Did you do any pivot? And also in the kind of overall context, how can the Web 3.0 storage can solve problems in the Web 2.0? Please give us an intro about yourself and also the things you are working on, please.
Yes, thanks, Bruce, and thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, so I'm co-founder and CTO of Bluzelle. We started the company 8 years ago, kind of in the early days, so to speak. And yeah, we've done some pivots over the years, as can be expected. The last time I was on a panel with NKN, we were working quite a bit with building a decentralized key value store. And we actually were doing this with our own consensus engine. So there's actually been considerable changes on our side. We actually are now running on a Cosmos stack, Cosmos Tendermint. And we're still focused really on storage, but kind of going, this is sort of a bit of a segue from Zhou. We're also using IPFS technology for some of our storage. So it's actually a very interesting connection there. So our focus right now is really on providing on the Cosmos IBC ecosystem the ability for applications to have the ability to store data, with high availability, and also to ensure the integrity of this data. So, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the stuff that was just mentioned because Joao did a great job talking about all the value propositions. So I'll just talk more specifically about what Bluzelle is doing. We're doing kind of a more narrower sector, focusing specifically in our space and working with dApps running in Cosmos and specifically GameFi. We're actually building our own game called Gamma 4. And some of the things that games would need, for example, running in the decentralized Web3 space, would be amongst them NFTs, which we're doing. But our NFTs also have to have the ability to store content tied to the NFTs. So that's where the storage technology is really, really vital. Although it's not necessarily as critical as what Zhao mentioned with a legal case where you want to prove the existence of certain data and also the integrity of the data. With games, you still, especially with NFTs, you still have to have the provenance, and you have to be able to prove that or at least have the content tied to that data immutable and highly available. So where we come in is we've got our own proof of stake chain running on Cosmos, and it provides the ability to pin files across our network. So the idea, really, just to boil it down and make it simple, is you're running a game, and let's say you've got a bunch of content, a bunch of characters or NFTs, whatever, JPEGs, video files, what have you. And you need to store them in a way where that NFT is able to access that in the future, right? It's tied to a certain CID, content ID on IPFS. The idea would be that you would upload the file to IPFS, and as most people probably know, just uploading the file to IPFS alone without the benefits of some sort of economic layer like Filecoin would not be very reliable. The file could disappear. There's no incentive layer. And Zhao, anytime, correct me if I'm wrong, you're obviously the expert, and I am definitely open to hearing any corrections. So what we do is on the Cosmos layer, you can then come in and use the Bluzelle network to pin your file across our network. So effectively, the file that you just pushed gets propagated across our network, and it gets auto-pinned to all the nodes on Bluzelle. So that's a part of the offering that Bluzelle offers. We also are providing other things that are auxiliary to gaming, like NFTs, for example, and services around GameFi, so that developers that want to build games and other dApps, of course, they can come to Bluzelle through IBC and Cosmos, and they can basically use a combination of IPFS and our technologies to have a highly available storage layer.
Okay, thank you, Neeraj. So that's interesting. So you talk about use case. So the GameFi is really a good use case. So we'll touch upon that a little bit later as well. But let's now give Chi some time to talk about how do you see the issues with some of the storage solution in Web 2.0, and how are you going to address it with ETHStorage? Because I know it's a very new project and have the kind of the Ethereum's kind of community supporting it. So please give us a bit more detail, please.
Yes, thanks, Bruce. So, first of all, we would really appreciate all the innovations that have been done in the pioneers in this area, like Filecoin and Bluzelle, in terms of like proof of storage, all kinds of these technologies. At the same time, we see there's a lot of problem has been solved by Filecoin and IPFS, for example, especially in terms of cold storage costs. We also observe several storage-specific areas that still need some innovations. One area is that I heard, like, for example, I personally hold several NFTs, and also I also work with, I know a lot of people have NFTs, and they have a lot of sometimes I receive a lot of complaints saying that their images, even though the contract is issued on top of Ethereum, but their images can just be easily discarded, especially those projects that are launched several years ago, and the lack of maintenance, and they use centralized servers or IPFS without pinning, sufficient pinning, and then this image is just discarded just automatically after a few years. So that inspire me to revisit what kind of the storage, especially on top of Ethereum ecosystem, is that it's possible to build a storage system that we can reuse Ethereum mainnet security, so that when the user owns our NFT contract token on NFT contract, it also owns the corresponding image that is also secured by the Ethereum mainnet security, so that the user can actually own all the data of the NFT, not just a single token ID and a contract. So, and that motivates us to work on the ETHStorage. And that is very at the beginning. That's very difficult. Especially there are a lot of limitations on Ethereum, especially the gas cost. Everybody probably already know it. But we are very happy to see that with the latest development of and also innovations of Ethereum technologies, especially with data availability and their strong support for layer 2. So basically, data availability in Ethereum solved one great problem, is to increase the update upload bandwidth to their on-chain with roughly 10 times and 20 times of the bandwidth improvement. So that is a technology that can greatly save the cost of the data that I want to upload to the Ethereum network. So this is a prerequisite that we are able to enable ETHStorage, because like the major cost in, for example, storing the data on top of Ethereum is basically the upload cost and the corresponding storage cost. So with that, we are expecting that this kind of like a cost problem can be solved by data availability technologies, like especially tank shorting. The second is that we are able to using our proof of storage, especially built on top of smart contracts, so that we are able to dramatically also save the storage cost. For example, right now it's very expensive on Ethereum, but we are able to reduce the cost to 1% or even 0.1%. So that we hope that, especially for the case that the users would like to pay some money in order to secure their NFT or their data, large amount data on top of Ethereum security, while at the same time we are able to offer much cheaper solutions versus current Ethereum storage. So that's the major goal of the ETHStorage. And other couple of the goals, for example, we are actually also a key value store with large values. Thanks to EVM portability, we are able to easily implement some feature that is hard for cold storage. For example, we are able easily to implement data composability, so that we are able, when your user browse a decentralized website hosted by smart contract, so the smart contract can tell, for example, when a Twitter or an article that is hosted by this contract, it can tell what kind of additional data from different users. For example, it can return corresponding comments, also following thread for a tweet article. So there are a lot of things that originally will be very hard to achieve using static cold storage. Now with the hot storage we are offering with full KV CIUD semantics, together with the smart contract programmability, now we are able to enable a lot of applications that is very close to Web2 user experiences. So basically, these are two major goals that we want to achieve. And we have a few demos that is already there, like for example, decentralized job box, very simple decentralized broker, but to tell still how the data composability is working, and also including decentralized, actually the on-chain NFT that can be programmed by smart contract and composed by smart contract. So love to discuss more about these areas. I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chi. I think both from what you have been saying and also from what Neeraj has been saying, so there's a kind of stronger connection between the storage segment, storage part of it, and also the computing part. Let's say computing is the smart contract part. So, and also I noticed that like Filecoin has been also been busy with their virtual machine technology as well. I think start with FVM and also eventually go into EVM compatibility. So, Joao, I don't know if you want to say anything about this one. So, how can the storage and the computing be more closely kind of working together to provide a better foundation for the app developers?
Yeah, sure. So I want to take a step back first and talk a little bit about the sort of master plan that Filecoin has. There's a couple of tweets about it. I will share one in a bit when I have more time. But really, there's really three main stages. Stage one is add as much capacity as possible. We've done that. We've managed to onboard, I think, about 16 exabytes of capacity. Stage two is onboard lots of data. That's in the process of happening, and I can talk a little bit about the stats in a bit. And stage three is add compute over that data, where compute can refer to actually two things. It can refer to the computation over the data itself off-chain, or it can also run compute over some chain state, right, with the FVM. And there's a lot of really cool things that are happening in that third stage. So with regard to the FVM, there's a lot of interesting news. We are going to launch the Filecoin virtual machine, the FVM, and the FEVM, right, an Ethereum virtual machine compatible compatible virtual machine, and it's going to be used to actually have the functionality of smart contracts on the Filecoin blockchain, and that's going to unlock some really interesting things, right? It could be used to have well, first of all, the financial aspect of it. There are a lot of needs for liquidity of the Filecoin token to guarantee as collateral, as I mentioned previously. So having staking pools is going to massively increase the amount of, the amount of easy to find fill that you need to actually transact on the network. And then, of course, all the creative stuff that a Filecoin that a virtual machine would actually enable. Everything from NFTs to gaming, but also data-related things. Data DAOs, for example, right? A collective of people who can add funds to some sort of endowment and then charge access to data, right? So this unlocks that dream that we've had for a long time of actually being able to flow back the value that is created off of data back to its users, back to its owners. And then you can combine that with compute over data, which is what we're calling the technology for decentralized compute over the data that is stored on the Filecoin system, which allows you to actually do things with the data, right? It could be used to train machine learning models. It could be used to parse and ingest and create new data pipelines. Anything you want to do, right? So there's tremendous value to unlock there by combining computation over the data itself with the FVM by creating an entire data economy. And that's something we're really excited about. You can try these things out already, actually. We have just released V17 of Filecoin, where actually you can now play around a little bit with those smart contracts for specific actors on the network. The main functionality is due to come, I believe, mid-2023. And with the compute over data, I encourage you to look at the documentation for that at bacalhau.org. It's a Portuguese word for compute over data, for codfish, which is compute over data. You can do some really cool stuff. There's some interesting demos where you can do some ML model inference with GPT-3 or OpenAI stuff like Whisper to, for example, transcribe videos that are on the network, basically. So you just refer to them by the CID, and you can actually do things with the content itself and have full working decentralized data pipelines, which is really great. So those are a few of the things that we're exploring in terms of like that third stage and really creating a viable decentralized data economy where we can actually flow value back to data owners, preparers, ingesters, all these different people in the data supply chain.
Okay, so Zhao, yeah, I think thanks for clarification, because when I was thinking about computing, I was a little bit too narrowly focused on the smart contract part. But you're right. So the computing, there are two parts of it. One is more off-chain kind of computing, that's like machine learning and data injection, etc. That you work on the data, and the other one is really to create on-chain event. So, Neeraj, do you have anything also in this space? Because you mentioned that you are kind of specialized GameFi, but you definitely have something to do with the computing part as well. So how do you kind of reconcile these two kind of emerging technology and make it a better kind of proposition for the game developers? Neeraj, you are on mute.
Oh, thank you. Yes. We're not specifically doing anything in terms of on-chain compute like Joao was talking about for Filecoin and IPFS. In terms of ours, we're kind of sort of decentralizing things, I guess, to the edge where, the games that are running, they're not necessarily going to be using the blockchain itself for compute. They're really just using our technology for the NFT aspects, the storage aspects, like the painting of the files, and obviously in combination with IPFS. So we're taking an approach where, for example, with the game that we're currently building, a lot of the compute, so to speak, actually runs in a centralized kind of data center like an Azure or an AWS. And there's a fair bit of compute that's actually done also on the game client itself, running in the web browser. And when it comes down to data that's I guess corruptible or that's really critical to the operations of the game, and ensuring that the integrity of the game and the participants and the game rules are enforced, that's where really our chain comes in. So that would go back to storing data on our chain related to ownership and NFTs, and of course the content itself, the files, any sort of content tied to the game, the ownership. When people are playing the game, they're upgrading their skills or they're buying NFTs, doing any trading. That's where we're really coming in, and we're providing that storage layer so that these games, their integrity is ensured.
Okay, thanks, Neeraj. We're at a bit of a midpoint, so just kind of recap. So this is the Web 3.0 Pioneers storage panel. So I'm Bruce, I'm from NKN. So I'm moderator, and we have Zhao from Filecoin. We have Neeraj from Bluzelle and Chi from ETHStorage. So now I'm going to switch gear a bit about one of the common questions in Web 3.0 storage. So with the kind of token economics, it's very easy to provide the supply side. Like for example, when we had a Chia network, and so when everything's booming, so I've heard that everybody buy up all the storage, especially the NAND or the flash devices to mine for Chia. And all of a sudden you have a huge amount of supply. But one of the kind of main problems has always been, do you have enough kind of demand for that kind of storage? So I don't know if anybody, especially Joao or anybody else, have some kind of insights about how to build the kind of the demand side as well, because I think we proved that Web 3.0 incentives can definitely kind of spur the supply side, but how do we incentivize the demand side? Do you have anybody have any takes?
Yeah, definitely have some thoughts to share. I think that's really the main thing that my team is focused on, is driving the utility of the network by actually accelerating the adoption of people who want to use Filecoin as a decentralized storage option. So we've seen really, really crazy growth over the last year. I believe since January, we are about 9.5x the amount of data that's been onboarded. Today, we see between 3 to 4 petabytes of data being onboarded every day. And so that's up really significantly. I believe today we just crossed 350 petabytes of data total onboarded. So it's really exciting to see the beginning of that hockey stick curve. The real question is, who are these people? We're seeing really interested parties coming in from across the board, especially Web2 data owners who have vast amounts of data that they want to archive. And I see this really as incremental archival in a sense, right? Like the cost is so cheap that they might as well archive things that maybe they weren't even planning on archiving. And then, of course, there are instances where it is replacing some other solution. But a couple of interesting clients to note. Last, I believe, 2 weeks ago, we announced that one of the experiments at CERN in Switzerland, right, like the Large Hadron Collider, their Atlas experiment will begin storing data on the Filecoin network via one of the storage providers called ETHStorage. That's extremely exciting because they have many dozens of petabytes to onboard data, right? And so these are experiments that are generating extremely large data sets per experiment that they run, and they need somewhere to store it. They don't want to store it on AWS because the costs are simply far too high, and they also need the ability to verify that the data that hasn't changed. You know, if and when you want to repeat experiments or publish your article, your papers, you want to make sure that the data is intact. There's others, right? So the research realm has really been a big driver of demand. University of Utah, University of Maryland, Berkeley University, anything that's dealing with medical imaging is also very exciting. I'm also very excited about machine learning as a source of data. You know, there have been really significant advances in open models like Stability AI, Stability Diffusion, right, that are generating so much new synthetic data, images, videos. So that's extremely exciting because you're starting to create that flywheel effect where models trained on that data will create even more data. And so you have this sort of synthetic data sets built on synthetic data sets, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have, other folks who are keen to archive things in a decentralized way. You have the Internet Archive, for example. Folks who have built the Wayback Machine who are taking snapshots of every website possible. They are onboarding their data. We have large archives like the Prelinger archives. And then, one of the interesting clients that I like to point to is also the Sterling Lab, where they are storing interviews recorded with Holocaust survivors, for example, right? And we want to make sure that we preserve humanity's most important information. So Filecoin is a really ideal solution for that. They can pick exactly who they store with, for how long, under what terms. And so we're really starting to see a lot of demand. I can also talk a little bit about the actual tokenomics about it, since that's what you mentioned previously. One of the ways that we are rewarding storage providers for taking on this usable, verified data is by multiplying the block awards that they receive for the deals that they take that are known to be sort of verified by our community. Verified meaning we have a system of notaries, actual community members who really are sort of putting their reputation on the line by saying, this is real data, this is data that is useful for the network. And so we are 10xing their block awards. But on the other hand, in order to take on a deal, you also have to put up some collateral. And the collateral that you have to put on up for that deal also is 10 times higher. And so that's a way to also lock up some circulating supply of Filecoin and really keep our economy healthy. So both rewarding the storage providers, but also rewarding the clients, because the incentives are so high that in many cases, storage providers offer the solution for storage at a much, much cheaper rate. So I don't want to go down too much of this rabbit hole, but it is really interesting how the crypto economics and market dynamics can make it for some really special sort of dynamics where clients and storage providers benefit very much.
Okay, so I think that's a good point, because I think to use the token economics not only to incentivize the provider but also the user of the system, I think it has proved it to be quite successful. Not related to storage, but in other areas like the gaming or the pay to earn type of exercise and fitness, etc. So yeah, I'm happy to see that it's actually happening in the storage area as well. So one of the next question is, I think both Qi and Neeraj talked about NFT and their storage. So I think right now, most people might be limited to the idea of just JPEGs or some kind of small JPEGs. But I think it's probably have much larger kind of use case in terms of how to associate physical assets and onto on-chain kind of token. So I don't know if Chi or Neeraj want to say anything about those kind of connection between the physical world and the kind of virtual metaverse world, and how NFT and the storage can become, what kind of new requirements will be for the future.
For NFT perspective, yes, I agree. Like right now, the utility value of NFT are quite limited. Like for example, famous NFT like BAYC and also Azuki, all those are just static images. We are basically envision what are the future applications of NFT. Like for example, I have a friend. He is a very senior people in MiHoYo, that is the producer of Genshin Impact. From their view perspective, they envision that virtual reality and also metaverse, there will be much more and more assets that should be moved to on top of blockchain. From their viewpoint. So for example, not only for example just these images, but also their probably the equipments, their caricatures, and also some, for example, their rare items. All these things now can be hosted by blockchain and also be circulated with the players. And that's something that I think they are also envision that blockchain and NFT can help with their, for example, the future of their products. And then, with that great in mind, is that I think it's also closely with, for example, GameFi. So we are projecting like there will be more demand of the data that I put on blockchain. For example, right now it's still more static files, but it's possible that we are able to also have a 3D model that is also be able to host it on top of blockchain, and then be able to render as an NFT. And also all those models can, for example, can be dynamically changed according to the, for example, the levels of the character or different equipments or different items, which themselves can also be NFT. And then we are able to, for example, compose those NFT to new NFTs, just like what we have the same experience in the gaming. But that require corresponding on-chain programmability, so that we can tell us that what's the, according to the latest status of these NFTs, what the actual NFT should be presented to the for the users. And for that part, that is something that we believe with on-chain computation of smart contract, and together with the data solutions that we can offer, so that we are able to couple the on-chain computation power and also the storage power that offered by our layer 2 solutions, so that you can just natively integrate with them, and then so that we are able to dynamically return what the actual user image look like, is according to their latest status on chain, which further reflect their status on top of the metaverse, for example, in different games. So that's some directions that we think that should introduce a lot of Web2 users, especially from gaming, so that they can really own not just like, for example, the assets in the game, but be able to host it on blockchain, be able to circulate with all the players in the world. Yeah.
And Neeraj, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great question. If I understand it correctly, the question was around really, what kind of storage is available related to NFTs? Like, is it relegated to just images and other related types of data, or is it more open? So on our end, really, what you're storing on our storage layer, which as I said earlier, originates with pushing the file to IPFS and then calling a pin on our network. We don't really care what kind of content it is, to be honest. Like, I mean, it could be an image, and most likely would be images. My understanding is most NFTs are image related, but there's no such limitation. The content can be whatever you want it to be. It can be a video file, it could be a JPEG, it could be a text file, it could be a massive blob of encrypted data, hash data, whatever you want it to be. Our goal really is to provide a very general purpose means for developers building dApps in our ecosystem to be able to formulate their own forms of content, whatever it may be, existing types or their own data structures, and use IPFS as a kind of a gateway to push that file in. And IPFS would also be the means of accessing the data, but silently behind the scenes, there's this sort of magic replication level where you're paying, within the Bluzelle economic system to have that file replicated. And I think, most people would understand. I mean, Filecoin, a big part of it is that as well, is to ensure that you have an availability layer, because obviously having the content stored is one thing, making sure that it's available in the future for use, in our case for games, and having that available and providing the value for an NFT is critical. These NFTs, a lot of their value in a marketplace is quite proportional to the I guess the expectation that the content that's tied to them is going to be available. So, for example, if you bought an NFT and the content disappeared overnight, or there was some sort of stigma around the fact that, this NFT may not have anything tied to it, it'll become useless at some point in time, it really diminishes its value. So, we're trying to do that, but we also want to give developers, especially in the gaming industry where creativity is critical, we want to give them the flexibility to use whatever types they want. It could be existing data types, it could be 3D meshes, it could be videos, it could be whatever they want it to be. That's really in their court.
All right. Thanks, Neeraj. So I think we're getting closer to the end. So I'll actually end this session with one of my regular grammar test. So the question more like, when do you think this Web 3.0 based storage can be used by my grandma? Even she might not notice it. So I volunteered to give two examples, right? So first of all, let's say my grandma had produced a family lineage like a website, and lineage website that was probably, let's say, 15, 20 years ago. It was on GeoCities, which is defunct nowadays. So if you want to look at it now, probably will be using the Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine. So if that is hosted on the IPFS Filecoin, I think that's one way that she will actually look at her old website, revigorated on top of a Web 3.0 storage foundation. So that's one example. And the second example is at NKN, we work in the networking area, so not so much on storage. So we have a chat app that's called N-Mobile. So because we don't store anything, so whenever we need to send a file or image or video, we actually store on IPFS and maybe in the future on Filecoin. So whenever I send a message to my grandma, or my grandma used the N-Mobile chat app, so basically she's actually using the Web 3.0 storage underneath. So those are kind of my quick two examples, like the grammar test, when an application actually can have the mass adoption, even my grandma can use, but she might not notice it. So I'm just going to my panelists and speakers to see what's your vision of some kind of Web 3.0 storage enabled application. Your grandma will be happily using it every day, but without noticing it.
I mean, I can go. I think there are many websites already hosted on IPFS. Fleek is a tool that allows people to do that pretty seamlessly. Everything, all our website content assets, right, Filecoin.io, that's all under the hood being served via IPFS, which is pretty cool because it's completely transparent. Maybe your grandma won't be going to Filecoin.io, but I imagine that as package management and asset management becomes easier, there's really no reason not to host websites via things that are stored and pinned on IPFS. I think when it comes to mass storage, I would probably say at least a year. I think that a point that was made previously, we're getting closer and closer to passing the grandma test in terms of an accessible, easy way to store things on the Filecoin network. However, in terms of its availability and retrievability, there's still a lot of work to do. And so until we figure out both of those sides of the equation, we won't see mass market adoption. But if you're gifting your grandma an NFT for Christmas, you can definitely count on that NFT very likely being on IPFS already. So maybe that's a good answer.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Neeraj, you want to take the next, or Chi? Neeraj, please. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for us, we don't specifically right now have in our roadmap any kind of, I guess, client slash customer facing application use cases where there would really be like a grandma-esque type test that would be there. But I suppose if and mostly joking, if we have grandmothers that are developers and building games, I suppose there might be a grandma test there. But I'm mostly tongue in cheek about that. But our goal, kind of related to the question, is making it as simple as possible so that developers that are building games, and I'll focus really on the use case of games instead of trying to go very general, just so I can make very specific answers to the question. Our goal is really to make Web3 decentralization, blockchain, and obviously in this context storage, as simple as possible and quite frankly transparent, so that we can appeal to the game developers out there that really haven't even gotten into Web3. As most people probably know, I mean, I go to GDC down in San Francisco most of the time, and it's still not really well accepted or adopted in that space. There's a lot of stigma, obviously, due to the news around stuff going on in the blockchain industry, which unfortunately casts a negative pall on all of us. So there is that uphill battle, but also eliminating or at least reducing friction so that these storage solutions can be used by developers is really important. So that, for example, and it's not really a grandma test, it's more like I guess, game developer test. I want to be able to go to your average developer at whatever studio, let's say it's Electronic Arts, and be like, hey, look, instead of going and spending tons of money and depending on AWS or Azure to do all these things, store all this data, all this mission critical data, let's say NFT data, why don't you just use this? And it's super simple. It's as simple as using an MSDN API or a C# API or a C++ API, a couple of lines of code, and boom, you're in there, right? So really kind of, reducing or eliminating all the requirements for developers to go in and now get crypto wallets and establish keys and security around all that. That's really a big part of our so-called quote unquote grandma test. Just making it so that developers, it's a no-brainer for them that, oh, okay, that's really simple. These couple of lines and boom, I'm using Web3 and I've got all the benefits right there, right? That's kind of what our thing is. So it's more of a back end thing. It's not really a consumer facing thing. Although at the end of the day, the consumers, whether they know it or not, they're benefiting from all this technology that we're building for them.
Okay, thanks, Neeraj. How about Chi? Your take?
Yes, that's a great question. Especially how it depends on the technology level of my grammar. So according to my experience, assuming like the grammar just has basic internet knowledge, I think ETHStorage combining with the computation on-chain computation power and together with storage, basically we are able to enable most of the Web2 applications on top of Web3. For example, a couple of directions that now we are exploring with our community members, like, for example, decentralized GitHub, decentralized Wikipedia, besides like decentralized social network. The good thing is that as long as the grammar does not want to, for example, write data on top of blockchain, for example, you just want to understand what's the latest developments or latest, for example, news on Twitter. Actually, the grammar doesn't need a wallet. It just needs to enter, for example, probably doesn't need to enter to just like open a a link that either in our Web3 scheme or in our gateway format that is starting with HTTP. Now the grammar now is able to explore all the content that is hosted by ETHStorage and also composed by smart contract in a completely decentralized way. So that is something that we are able to enable. Also, from suppose like I have a very, very high technical grammar. He would like to, for example, issue her NFT or issue some fancy things on top of blockchain, and that is also very easy for her. Like as long as he understands basic knowledge of, for example, Ethereum wallet, all kinds of this basic Web3 knowledge. So then he can just like, for example, open an app, open a website, paste her images, for example, with her friend or her like my grandchild, and then now you just paste it on the decentralized website that hosted by smart contract, and then just perform a single transaction, and then it will just automatically create all the NFT and corresponding images link hosted also on the ETHStorage and Ethereum smart contract. So in that sense, so the grammar doesn't even need to, for example, need to learn SDK or others. Even though like Ethereum SDK is quite mature and widely adopted by a lot of developers, but from grammar perspective, you just need a wallet, needs a bit Ethereum, and some raw materials like images, and everything is just automatically done by smart contract and also our ETHStorage. So that's something that we envision that we are able to have a lot of grammars that are able to share their lives and also explore their lives in the Web3.
Okay, thank you, Chi. So we have a few minutes. So if anybody on the listener side want to raise your hand, we can still take maybe one or two questions, and I'll wait for a few seconds. And so if anybody raised their hand, if not, then I think it's let's wrap up. And so today is storage, and the Web3 is 3.0 storage. You might have already been using it, and you definitely will be using more. And thanks all our panelists, Joao from Filecoin, Neeraj from Bluzelle, and Chi from ETHStorage. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
All right.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.